Right then, picture this. You wake up one morning, check the news, and discover that the Prime Minister is quietly preparing to hand chunks of British sovereignty back to Brussels without so much as a whisper to Parliament or a referendum for the public. No vote, no debate, just a quiet legislative reset that could fundamentally alter the Brexit you thought was delivered. Sounds like a political thriller, doesn't it? Well, buckle up, because this isn't fiction. This is Sir Keir Starmer's latest Brexit gambit, and it's causing absolute pandemonium across Westminster. Now, let us set the scene properly. It's 2025, nearly a decade since that seismic referendum that split the nation down the middle like a particularly controversial Marmite advertisement. Brexit was supposed to be done and dusted, delivered, oven ready, as someone rather memorably promised. Yet here we are, and the Prime Minister is preparing to unveil what critics are calling the most significant erosion of British sovereignty since we actually left the European Union. The mechanism? Something called dynamic alignment. And if that phrase doesn't immediately send shivers down your spine, it absolutely should. Quick favor, if you're loving this content, smash that subscribe button. Over 94% of you haven't yet. It's completely free, takes barely a second, and honestly means a world to us here at British Mirror. Cheers if you did. Right, back to the chaos. So what exactly is dynamic alignment? Well, imagine you're in a relationship where you promise to automatically agree with everything your partner decides, forever, without having any say in the decision-making process. Romantic, isn't it? That's essentially what dynamic alignment means in this context. The United Kingdom would bind itself to follow European Union rules on whatever issues get swept up in these negotiations, automatically adopting changes Brussels makes without Parliament getting a vote, and certainly without asking you, the British public, what you think about it. It's the legislative equivalent of saying whatever you reckon, and then discovering your mate has volunteered you for a marathon when you haven't run since school sports day. Number 10 is positioning this as a cornerstone of Starmer's grand reset with Brussels. They are hoping this deal will underpin Britain's relationship with the European Union following last year's accord on food standards that Labour struck with European negotiators. On paper, it sounds almost reasonable. Closer alignment with our largest trading partner. Smoother trade. Less friction at the borders. Ministers are convinced this approach will turbocharge economic growth like some sort of regulatory rocket fuel. But here's where it gets properly sticky. The moment you pursue dynamic alignment, you're essentially surrendering control over your own standards in those aligned areas. Think about it. Every time Brussels decides to update a regulation, tweak a standard, or shift policy on issues covered by this alignment, Britain would automatically follow suit. No parliamentary scrutiny, no public consultation, no democratic oversight whatsoever. For a country that voted specifically to take back control in 2016, this feels rather like handing the steering wheel to a backseat driver you specifically asked to leave the car. Brexiteers are, predictably, going absolutely spare about this. They are warning that this concession marks the first genuine loss of United Kingdom sovereignty on standards since Britain's departure from the European Union. Shadow Foreign Secretary Dame Priti Patel hasn't minced her words either. She's accused Labour of a Brexit betrayal that's becoming clearer by the day, claiming Sir Keir is actively trying to undo the democratic decision of the British people. Strong words, but are they hyperbolic or hitting the nail squarely on the head? Here's where the political theatre gets properly interesting. Labour sources have fired back with their own defence, and it's rather cleverly constructed, actually. They argue that the bill will simply give government powers to share rules with the European Union, pointing out that literally all international agreements involve shared rules. That's the fundamental nature of treaties and trade deals, they say. They are confident about making the case for specific trade-offs where there are clear benefits for businesses and consumers. Fair point, one might think, until you remember the critical difference. Most international agreements require parliamentary approval for significant changes. Dynamic alignment, by its very design, bypasses that democratic checkpoint entirely. And then Labour delivered what might be the sharpest political jab of this entire saga. Their source reminded everyone that it wasn't so long ago that Priti Patel's boss, former Prime Minister Rishi Sunak, made remarkably similar arguments when his government U-turned on the Brexit bonfire of European Union regulations. They invoke pragmatism, What works in the real world? All those sensible-sounding justifications politicians deploy when they're about to do something their supporters won't particularly enjoy. It's political whataboutism at its finest, and whilst it doesn't exactly justify Labour's approach, it does rather highlight the spectacular inconsistency plaguing both major parties on this issue. Sir Keir soft-launched his policy over the weekend, though he stopped short of completely capitulating to demand that Britain rejoin the customs union. Speaking to the BBC, the Prime Minister said he thinks we should get closer to Europe, and if it's in Britain's national interest to have even closer alignment with the single market, then we should seriously consider it. We should go that far, he declared. He specifically mentioned energy alignment and emissions cooperation as existing examples, suggesting further single market alignment should happen wherever it serves British interests. Now here's a fascinating contradiction at the heart of Starmer's position. Despite admitting he personally argued for a customs union for many years, the Prime Minister now reckons a lot of water has gone under the bridge and it's no longer the right approach. Why the change of heart? His concern that a customs union with the European Union risks absolutely torpedoing Britain's new trade deals, including the much-trumpeted accord recently negotiated with India. So essentially, Starmer wants closer alignment with Europe but draws the line at full customs union membership because that might upset trade deals with countries outside Europe. It's rather like wanting to have your cake, eat it too, and also save a slice for later while simultaneously claiming you're on a diet. Reform UK leader Nigel Farage, never one to miss an opportunity for pointed observation, has argued that this pivot breaks faith with Labour's manifesto pledges on the European Union. And honestly, he's got a point. This isn't even the first time in recent weeks that the Prime Minister has faced accusations of betraying Brexit. Just last month, the government announced it would rejoin the European Union's Erasmus student exchange scheme at a cost of roughly £570 million for just 1 year membership. That's not a typo. 570 million quid. For 1 year. To rejoin a program the United Kingdom left under Boris Johnson specifically because he argued it didn't offer value for money. British politics is fractured into 5 roughly equal chunks, and the governing party is 4th or 5th depending on how you slice it. A staggering 68% of those surveyed by YouGov between December 27th and 29th said they disapproved of Sir Keir's government. 68%. More than 2/3 of the country actively disapproves. Just 12% said they approved. 12%. That's not just unpopular. That's historically, catastrophically, career-endingly unpopular. Another poll in November showed half of Labour voters want Sir Keir to quit. Half of his own voters. Not opponents, not swing voters, but people who actually voted Labour in July 2024 now think he should resign. When your own supporters have turned against you, you've got a problem that can't be fixed with better messaging or policy tweaks. You've got a fundamental crisis of confidence. Sir Keir's future at number 10 is likely to be decided on May 7th when elections will be held for the Welsh Senedd, Scottish Parliament, and local authorities in England. May 7th. That's the real deadline. Not 2027, not the next general election, but May 7th, 2026. If Labour gets hammered in those elections, and all evidence suggests they will, the pressure on Sir Keir will become unbearable. Backbench MPs facing decimation in their constituencies will start demanding change. Party donors will panic. The media will declare his premiership finished. He might survive, but he'll be mortally wounded, a zombie Prime Minister limping towards inevitable defeat. Labour currently leads the Senedd, but is expected to get a drubbing at the polls in what would mark an historic defeat for Welsh Labour, which has been in power since devolution began in 1999. Since devolution began, Labour has controlled Wales for a quarter century. If they lose that stronghold, it's not just politically embarrassing, it's symbolically devastating. It would signal that even in Labour's traditional heartlands, even in areas that have voted Labour for generations, the party is being rejected. That's not a temporary blip. That's a fundamental realignment. While Sir Keir and his cronies are emphasizing stability and talk of efforts to ease the cost of living, others are waiting in the wings to take the helm. Waiting in the wings. That's diplomatic language for sharpening their knives. Health Secretary Wes Streeting, Home Secretary Shabana Mahmood, and Mayor of Greater Manchester Andy Burnham have all been reported as harboring leadership ambitions. Harboring leadership ambitions. That's a delicate way of saying they're positioning themselves to replace Sir Keir when, not if, he falls. These aren't idle rumors. These are serious politicians with significant support bases calculating when to make their move. Where Streeting is particularly interesting because he's been remarkably visible and outspoken for a health secretary. His taken on the NHS, the unions, and vested interests with a boldness that contrasts sharply with Sir Keir's caution. Whether you agree with his positions or not, he's demonstrating political courage and clarity that makes him an obvious alternative if Labour decides they need a change. Shabana Mahmood as Home Secretary is handling some of the most contentious issues around immigration and law and order, giving her visibility and authority. Andy Burnham, meanwhile, has cultivated an image as a successful regional leader who actually delivers for his constituents, offering a contrast to Westminster dysfunction. The fact these names are being openly discussed as potential replacements, while Sir Keir insists he'll still be Prime Minister next year, tells you everything about how weak his position actually is. Strong leaders don't face constant speculation about their successors. Secure Prime Ministers don't have to repeatedly insist they'll still be in post 12 months hence. The very fact Sir Keir is making these statements reveals how precarious his situation has become. He's not projecting strength. He's desperately trying to stave off a leadership challenge he knows is coming. What makes Sir Keir's position particularly tragic is that he won such a massive majority, 411 seats. A parliamentary landslide, the kind of majority most politicians dream about, the kind of majority that should give you freedom to implement your vision, to take bold action, to transform the country. Instead, Sir Keir has squandered that majority through timidity, poor communication, and policies that alienate both his progressive base and the working-class voters Labour needs to retain. He has managed the extraordinary feat of uniting both wings of his coalition in disappointment and frustration. The comparison to the conservative chaos of 2022 and 2023 is instructive, but not in the way Sir Keir thinks. Yes, the constant leadership changes were damaging. Yes, the instability hurt the country. But at least the Conservatives recognized when leaders had failed and removed them. Liz Truss lasted 4 to 9 days because her policies crashed the economy and her party removed her. That's accountability. What Sir Keir is arguing for is that Labour should stick with him regardless of performance, regardless of polling, regardless of electoral consequences, because changing leaders would be chaotic. That's not stability. That's stubbornness. That's prioritizing his own position over the party's electoral prospects.